have you here for our panel event on Women Challenging the HHS Mandate. A brief summary of the chain of events that led to this event that many of you may know, but just to bring you up to term. On January 20th, the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services approved a mandate that will force Catholic institutions to provide contraception, sterilization procedures, and abortifacients in their healthcare plans, effectively forcing Catholic employers to violate their consciences and fund practices that are morally offensive. On February 8th, the Catholic Information Center right here, we hosted a panel discussion contesting the HHS mandate. On February 10th, President Obama announced a modification to that mandate in an attempt to accommodate religious liberty by making the insurance companies pay for contraception and those other procedures in the health care plans of religious institutions. The U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops responded that the mandate still remains problematic because it maintains that all insurers must include coverage for these objectionable services. Since the continuing debate has been framed as a conflict between women and religion, the Catholic Information Center is pleased today to join the Catholic Women's web magazine, Alt Catholica, in hosting this all-women panel to discuss continued changes the HHS mandate poses for women and the Church. So I will introduce Ashley McGuire. She's on your far left. Ashley will be the moderator this evening, and she is the editor-in-chief of the Catholic Women's web magazine, Alt Catholica. Currently a Robert Novak Journalism Fellow, she is writing a book about the cultural disempowerment of girls and women. Her writing has appeared in the Wall Street Journal, the Washington Post, First Things, and the Catholic Thing, among others. Ashley is a graduate of Tufts University in Boston. And the format of the evening's event will be a few minutes of remarks for each panelist, followed by moderated discussion, and then we'll open for audience questions and answers. But thank you, and I'll leave it to Ashley. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mary Rose, and thank you to the Catholic Information Center for hosting this with Alt Catholica tonight. I'm thrilled that this is taking place because, as Mary Rose mentioned, this debate about the HHS mandate is increasingly being framed as one between women and religion, or women in the Catholic Church, which is very problematic because it's a distraction from the real issue, and it's also completely unfair to women who are completely divided about the mandate itself. And the constant refrain that we keep hearing is, where are the women? So I'm pleased to see that increasingly women are coming out and starting to speak, but we're really having to fight to get our voices out there. So I'm thrilled that this panel is taking place and that these four highly qualified women coming from very different professions, ranging from the legal profession to the medical profession, are here to give their perspectives as to why this is not an attack on women, or objecting to the mandate is not an attack on women. So I'm going to introduce our speakers to you. Directly sitting next to me is Carrie Severino. She's the Chief Counsel and Policy Director to the Judicial Crisis Network. In that capacity, she's briefed senators and congressmen, appeared on multiple TV outlets, and she also filed amicus briefs on behalf of 43 U.S. senators and Speaker Boehner in the Supreme Court litigation challenging Obamacare. Until March 2010, she was an Olin Searle Fellow and a Dean's Visiting Scholar at Georgetown Law Center. She was previously a law clerk to U.S. Supreme Court Justice Clarence Thomas and to Judge David B. Santel of the U.S. Court of Appeals for the D.C. Circuit. She's a graduate of Harvard Law School cum laude and Duke University. And then sitting next to her is Dr. Marie Anderson. She's the Chief Medical Officer at the Tepeyac Family Center in Fairfax, Virginia. Dr. Anderson received her MD from Georgetown University and completed her OBGYN residency at Georgetown in 1993. She has been board certified since 1995 and joined Tepeyac in 1997. Dr. Anderson is also president of the Northern Virginia Guild of the Catholic Medical Association. Maria Montserrat Alvarado is the Director of Operations for the Becket Fund for Religious Liberty, which has been very active in filing lawsuits against the mandate. Montserrat received her BA in Political Science from Florida International University and a master's from the George Washington University School of Political Management. She's on the board of directors for Shepherd's Table, a homeless shelter in Silver Spring, Maryland, and is a commissioner on the Montgomery County Commission for Women. And then finally, Gloria Purvis is a board member for the Northwest Pregnancy Center and Maternity Home. She received her BS in Human Development and Family Studies at Cornell University. She's policy director at a major financial services company. She has served on the National Black Catholic Congress's Leadership Commission and as an advisory board member on the Maryland Catholic Conference's Respect for Life Department, as well as the Archdiocese of Washington's Pastoral Council. She has taught natural family planning as a member of a pre-Cana team in the Archdiocese of Washington, and she is the creator and host of an upcoming EWTN series, Authentically Free at Last, which deals with the modern challenges to the expression and understanding of authentic human freedom. So once again, we're delighted to have these four very accomplished women, and I'm going to turn the floor over to Karen.
Thanks, Ashley. I want to start out by talking a little bit about the legal and constitutional framework of this issue, because I think the bottom line is this is not about the government and trying to defend women against the church. This is about individuals who care about religious freedom in general and care about our fundamental freedoms as well, standing up for religious freedom, whether you agree or disagree with the church's teaching on contraception in this case, whether you follow it or don't. This is about the freedom of religion at root. When our founding fathers were designing the Constitution, they had it very clearly in mind, trying to create a government that would withstand the constant, almost gravitational pull toward tyranny. They had just finished throwing off a tyranny. They didn't want to create a government that would fall into the same trap. And they understood that as fallen human beings, any government created by men is going to have that tendency. So their model for doing that was to have specific limitations in the government of two types. One is structural limitations. They said people go to the government with all of their natural human rights intact. We don't have rights that come from the government that, they give us the right to freedom, they give us the right to speech. No, we naturally, inherently as human beings have those rights. We cede certain aspects of those rights to the government insofar as they need to be able to function to operate as governments need to do for our national defense, in particular, for some of the major areas that the government is necessary in. But we don't just sit around waiting for rights to come to us from the government. We have them, and we only give them up in certain limited quantities. So they created a government that had limitations on what the government could do in the first place. So our government doesn't just have a mandate of go and do good in the name of people. Go and create laws that will be good for people. There is specific enumerated powers the federal government has. And by creating only enumerated powers, the founders thought this is the way we can limit what government will do. They can't be involved in as many dangerous things if they only are doing the specific tasks that a government can do. So it's things like, as I mentioned, national defense. We've got national bankruptcy laws. We need to have that. We need to have something moderating the interstate commerce activity, so states aren't having tariffs against each other, so we can function as a union. Things like that are necessary for a national government. Then there's another type of rights that the framers of the Constitution decided to include. And this was actually a big debate. They said, should we even include a list of rights the government can't transgress? We're basically saying you have all these rights anyway. You're reserving them. But they decided it's going to be crucial to also list certain rights that no matter what else the government thinks it's doing in your favor, there's certain fundamental rights that it's not going to transgress. And the first right they decided to include in that Bill of Rights was the right to freedom of religion, that the government is going to respect the freedom of religion, is not going to establish a religion. There also, of course, are free speech rights, and so on, and a lot of important rights of our, safety from search, and some fundamental rights where the government's not going to be able to treat you as inappropriately in a criminal justice system, et cetera. These are really fundamental rights to making sure we don't run into a tyrannical government. But the first one they included in there was freedom of religion. Now, a problem that we're seeing, I think, in our nation today is people who, from my view, have a much greater trust in government than our founding fathers did. So they didn't think you could just find some good people, let them take over and say, trust me, we'll do the right thing. That's why we have our Constitution in the first place. We don't have something like a lot of nations that, until recently have had, where the Parliament could change the laws or anything. We have a Constitution that can't be changed except for jumping over very high procedural hurdles. And that's because this is supposed to be the last line of defense. We don't just trust the government. Nowadays, I think we see a lot of people who are saying, well, the government has all these great things they can do, but the Constitution is getting in its way. And we have to understand that the Constitution is there sometimes purposely to get in the way, so that the only limited functions it's doing are these national things. The other functions of government can be left to state and local government, where it's much more directly responsible to the people who've elected their officials. They could then if they start getting out of line, the idea is the people are going to be much more able to restrain them and pull them back. That's a very Catholic idea as well, of subsidiarity, of the task of government should be operating on the lowest level possible, because then you do have that connection to the people and the responsiveness. If we view the government as the Constitution is getting in the way of our grand plans for the world, then we're having a problem. And that's unfortunate what we've seen throughout this healthcare discussion. Because, of course, all of us want to have affordable, good healthcare for our nation. But when one says, I've got this plan that's so good that we need to now overwhelm the constitutional limits on our government to do it, it's just that good, we need to step back and think very seriously about this. The one aspect in which it's done that is the structural limits in the Constitution. That doesn't go specifically to this mandate, but I think it's related, because you have the government saying, trust us, we have this authority that we can force you to buy a product. That's nowhere in the Constitution. There's the power to regulate commerce among the states, but they've said, well, we can force you to get into the commerce between the states in the first place. But once you have the government forcing you to buy a product, you have to acknowledge that it's going to be generally on the government's terms, not on your own. And once the government says we can force you to buy a product, it's understandable that the government then determines the outlines and limits of what that product is going to be. That, from a constitutional perspective, is bad enough, because it goes beyond the structural limits. But what President Obama did with this mandate is that he took it to the next step and went beyond even the additional limits of the Bill of Rights. So said, we can not only force you to buy a product that you weren't buying before, that you didn't buy before, and determine the outlines of that product, but we can force you to buy a product that violates your own conscience. That is the definition of tyranny, to say that we have the power over you. The government has the authority to force you to violate your own conscience. And that's what they've done in this mandate. So we need to recognize that the Bill of Rights has that limit for a fundamental reason, not because everyone in the country agrees that contraception is a moral evil and is damaging women and as well as men, but for the same reason that we respect any rights of conscience. For the same reason that we should all be up here having the same debate if the law were outlawing, say, circumcision. Maybe they could say, oh, there's medical beliefs that this is actually not as good as we thought. We can outlaw it now because there's risks involved in it and we don't see there's benefits. But no, we should all be sitting up here having the same debate and having the same defense if it was defending the right of Jewish people to circumcise their child, of a Jewish deli to carry pork, of a Muslim woman to wear a head covering. We should be up here defending these same rights, regardless of what the reasoning was. And I want to add one point as well about the president's the way he's gone about this in terms of the compromise, just to point out the fact that his compromise is the very heart of this problem with a trust me style of government. Because in fact, what has been marketed to us as a compromise was no such thing. The same day as the president announced his alleged compromise on this regulation, he actually, the HHS finalized the same regulation that he was saying he was compromising on. So they had this regulation that has a very, very limited exemption for religious organizations that, again, doesn't even cover groups like EWTN, doesn't cover groups like the Missionaries of Charity, things that you would think ought to be under a religious exemption. And at the same time as he's formalizing the regulation on one hand, he's saying, trust me, we'll still work this out. I'm now somewhere down the line within the next year that I'm giving you to decide how to deal with this. We'll fix this. That is not the kind of government that we're supposed to have. Not one that says, trust me, I won't go farther than you want me to, but one that says, I can only go up to this point in the first place. Recall, of course, the president has said, trust me, before. He said at Notre Dame, when he was campaigning for office in the first place, no, I will have robust conscience clause exemptions for everything that I do as president. That obviously hasn't turned out to be true. Then he introduces this compromise that first doesn't even do what he claimed it would do, and second of all relies on basically an accounting trick straight out of the Enron School of Public Accounting, saying, oh well, you're not paying for it. The insurance companies are paying for it. Yes, you're paying their bills, but that's just these picky little details. It's not for the government to decide what qualifies as violating my own conscience. So the fact that the government stands up there and says, "Oh, don't worry, we've sat and thought about it and thought that it didn't violate your conscience." No, this should be something that goes down to the person itself. It sounded almost like he was using the royal we. What we are you talking about? Were you discussing was this a compromise arrived at by long discussions and negotiations with the bishops? No, this is something he came up single-sidedly. So it's hard to even call it a we have compromised on that issue. So there's so much more that we could talk about on that, but just wanted to lay out some of the legal reasons that we want to have the religious freedom in the first place, and I hope we can delve into some more of them in the questions.
Okay, Dr. Anderson.
Okay. Well, I'd like to tell you first that I am an OBGYN, and so I feel that I, as a doctor in this particular field, have been set up to be the pawn in this greater chess game of the political battle that you've so beautifully outlined, and thank you so much for that outline. As a doctor, we depend on the legal profession and the laws in this country, and things such as the Constitution and our constitutional rights. And just as Carrie was saying, I feel that they could have picked anything to make this stand on, but they chose women's health. And that puts women in a place where they shouldn't be. Women should be able to choose their health care with their doctors, and those doctors should be free to practice according to their conscience. So tonight, I'd like to speak from two perspectives. First, as a woman, a wife, a mother, and second, as a doctor, because I feel that this has been a calculated effort. It started out with, as you said, oh yes, we'll have conscience protection, and it's gone downhill straight from there. I feel that as a part of the Catholic community, I'm being asked to pay for something that even on just a human level I don't agree with. I don't agree with purchasing a healthcare plan that all of us have to have one size fits all to begin with. Much less do I agree with having one that violates my personal beliefs. And at the level of a person, what they're asking me to do is pay for it. And you might say, well, what's the big deal about paying for it? Prevention is free. Somebody's got to pay for that, though. Even though prevention is free, somebody has to pay for it. And if I, in my tax dollars, pay for that, it says that I agree with it. It says I agree with it, and I don't. And this does not give me an out. I can't opt out and say, I don't agree with contraception or sterilization or whatever the case may be. They have not put abortion into this argument yet. But starting at the point with, oh yes, you'll have plenty of conscience protection, and then deteriorating to the point where, well, it's gonna prevent things. Prevention is free, and then down to the level of everybody must pay for it. I feel that my religious liberty and my liberty and dignity as a person is being just totally offended. For whatever reason, this administration feels that it has the right to give people a right. And in this case, that right is health care. It could be anything. When a government feels that they have the privilege to give any group of people a right, then they can take that right away. They can tell them how to exercise that right. They can manipulate that right. They can use it as coercion for other aspects of life. And that is just wrong. It is the mindset, I don't mind telling you this, my husband has told me this for 38 years that we've been married. Liberals always say the same thing. Don't worry, everything will be all right as long as you do it my way. And you will have absolutely no input into this decision. So the longer I go into this, the more I realize he's right. Yes, women's health care has been singled out, but really, there, but for the grace of God go I. As Carrie was saying, it could be any aspect of life that could be chosen to be the test case. I hate being the test case when something so important as women's health is at stake. She made the statement that it's about religious freedom, and it is. But in my case, I am being asked to dispense medications, perform surgeries, do procedures that I believe are not in women's best interest. These are dangerous things. People talk about the pill as if it were candy, and it's not. It is a powerful medicine. In some situations, a woman's reproductive system is broken, and then there are treatments for that, and they may include many things and many medications. But to take a woman's reproductive system that is working quite fine and break it is just wrong, especially if you're going to break it with a medication that has significant risks involved with it. Birth control pills, for example, have high doses of hormones in them, and these have been shown repeatedly, and you can pull out the package insert for these drugs and read. These drugs elevate the risk for deep vein thrombosis. These are blood clots that can kill you. Pulmonary embolism. These are blood clots that can go to your lungs and specifically kill you. Strokes, MIs. We hear all these things about if you're over 35 and you're smoking. The Food and Drug Administration says don't even think about going on this medication. It's that dangerous. That's at the medical level. Then look at the side effect, the side effect profile. Weight gain, nausea, bloating, bleeding, headaches, the list goes on. And those things, I mean, who would want to take a medicine that made you feel like that and put you at such high health risks? And then thirdly, and probably out of all these things, I hate to say it, but the part that's being missed is that it's taking fertility, which is a healthy state, and calling it a disease, and it's reducing taking part in a miracle, that of bringing a life into this world. That's a miracle. God's invited us to take part in that. And contraception snatches that privilege and turns sexual relations into merely a contact sport. I mean, talk about snatching defeat from the jaws of victory. I can't imagine a more effective way to do that. Women deserve better. They deserve not to have their bodies violated by a medication or a mindset or an opinion that the world holds. I can't tell you how many times I've had a patient crying in my office because of the way she was treated at secular gynecology office. Honestly, the scenario goes something like this. Okay, now this is the intake nurse, not even the doctors asking these questions. Okay, when was your LMP? When was your last period? What contraception are you using? You're not using contraception? Why? What's wrong with you is what is in that message. What is wrong with you that you're not having sex? Everybody does that. It's assumed. It's an entry-level question. And here you are telling me that you don't? And I've had people recount this in terrible detail, telling me how they have been judged because they're trying to live a chaste life, a moral life. And then if you have doctors that have to participate in this health plan, they can't, by definition, be practicing their Catholic faith. They may be able to have their Catholic faith privately, but when they come to the workplace, in order to implement this Obamacare, they're going to have to be a full-service gynecologist. And this plan will essentially drive out of medicine anyone who wants to live their faith. And once that piece is gone, do you realize what a huge part of our medical care is provided by Catholics and Catholic hospitals and Catholic institutions? We bring the heart to medicine. When I have someone who has a surprise pregnancy, I support them, I show them the baby, I do a sonogram, and I say, you know, this is a baby that's living in your womb, but this baby's life is in your hands. Seeing that baby in a woman's womb, seeing her own baby, so many times changes the course of that baby's existence. So many women who would abort that baby, especially if their doctor told them they had to. How many times have I heard, my doctor told me I had to have an abortion. The baby was not viable. And, you know, this is inexcusable. How many women who come to a doctor have the guts, really, to challenge them, especially if they haven't done their homework before they come to that appointment? It takes a lot of courage to go out and research. You know, my doctor told me I had to have an abortion. Well, first she has to not believe everything she hears. Then she has to go out and research on her own and find out, well, there are some other options, like continuing the pregnancy. Pregnancy is a healthy state. That's, you know, all of us got here because someone was pregnant. And she chose life, thank goodness. And then take it to the next step. I am the head of the perinatal hospice program at our office. And I have women in our practice who come to me who have babies with terminal diagnoses. I have patients who come to us from other practices because they've done their research and found that we will support a mother who has a pregnancy that has a terminal diagnosis. You know, in the past they've been told, get rid of it, it's garbage. Try again. Why are you wasting your time? But when you look at the literature, our peer-reviewed literature, there is an inordinate increase in the number of women who terminate their imperfect babies and then have disordered grieving later. They cannot grieve properly. They cannot come to acceptance that this is what God wanted for them. And the Catholic piece is so well fitted to this need to help these women. The most vulnerable a woman will ever be is when she is faced with a life-changing decision, be that for herself or her unborn child. This is a very, very difficult time, and it's a time when we need to be supported by people who feel and practice the same way we do, who have a similar faith background. And quite honestly, if this bill goes through the way it's written, there will be no Catholic doctors. By definition, there can't be, because of the penalties that have been levied and the mental outlay of the medical profession as it's being dictated to by an administration that really has no business doing this and doesn't have the expertise to design a system that would allow for personal religious differences, religious beliefs, and religious support. So I'd like to sum this up by quoting the Nebraska Attorney General, John Bruning, because I think he has summed this up best. We will not stand idly by while constitutionally guaranteed liberties are discarded by an administration that has been sworn to uphold them. I agree with this totally. You know, this administration, we elected this administration to serve us. And we essentially hired them. And if need be, I say we can fire them. And we'll see how this goes. We may have to do that.
Thank you. Lindsay? I am here on behalf of the Becket Fund for Religious Liberty, which is a nonprofit law firm here in Washington, D.C. that was the first law firm to respond legally to this mandate. We represent 4 clients at the moment and are looking for more. 3 schools, 2 that are Catholic, Belmont Abbey College, and 1 that's Ave Maria University. And the other is Colorado Christian University, an interdenominational Christian university, and EWTN. Those are currently our 4 clients, and when you talk about how this affects women, we always try to bring this back and say, no, this isn't a women's issue. That's the beginning of it. The media has twisted this into a women's issue because it's much easier for them to sell it to the liberal audience that way. It's much easier to get people to come to their congressional offices and to complain when you're saying, well, this is a women's rights issue, and you frame it in a very, very specific way so that an audience that has been constantly fighting for its rights says, wait a minute, didn't I have this right? Well, you do. And 41% of Catholic women who don't believe in contracepting are the women that are there saying, wait a minute, that's my voice too. So I want to discuss today 2 different myths and 1 issue that relates to this mandate. And this is the way that we like to frame this. The Becket Fund, and I include myself when I say we in a very royal Becket Fund we, that we want to create advocates and women who are very, very strong in what they believe and what they say, so that when someone tells you, well, what are you doing as a woman, you can turn around and say, well, this isn't a women's issue. This is a First Amendment issue. This has nothing to do with my right as a woman because I have robust rights under the Constitution if you respect it. So issue number 1 is that this is the Catholic Church going against women. That's completely untrue. This has nothing to do with the Catholic Church pinning itself and discriminating against women. This isn't the Catholic Church saying, hi, women over here, we don't like you because of what you're doing, and we want to judge you. This has nothing to do with that. The Catholic Church didn't choose women as the pinpoint of this discussion. The administration chose the Catholic Church as the pinpoint of their discrimination. They're discriminating against people who have deeply held religious beliefs who just want to live that way and have always lived that way. Traditionally and historically, this is the most narrow exemption for religious individuals that we've ever seen. So that's issue number 1. Issue number 2 is understanding that this is not an access issue. Everyone tells you, well, how am I going to be able to get the pills that I need because I have a iron deficiency because I bleed too much, or because I have this really, really great necessity and my OBGYN told me that this is what I need to be able to fix it. Well, there are many plans already that have this in them. 9 out of 10 employer healthcare plans already cover contraception. So why are you forcing these employers who have real religious exemptions to additionally cover it? It's not an access issue. You also have income-based help at different hospitals and with different federally funded clinics that give you this access to this contraception if you really want it. This isn't about access. This is about allowing institutions and organizations to continue to live according to their faith and to work according to their faith. And then issue number 3 is that everyone seems to think that all women are liberal women. And that's the saddest part of all. Because that means that us, and personally myself as a Catholic woman, I'm a half citizen the moment that I walk into a government office. That makes absolutely no sense. I deserve to live as a full citizen and to turn around no matter where I go and no matter what I'm buying and no matter what I want to do with my body and to say, I am Catholic. I am 100% a religious person. And we can say that about any other denomination or any other religion. Individuals who want to live according to their faith want to be full citizens and deserve to be full citizens. And the moment that you assume that they believe something else, you're telling them what to believe. And no government should be allowed to tell you what to believe. At the Becket Fund, we've come up with 150 academic women who have signed on to a statement called Unacceptable, showing that this is a women's issue only when you make it a women's issue. And we also have a petition that has over 100,000 signatures. It's called I Believe, and you can find it on our website, becketfund.org/IBelievePetition. And it's, again, a letter to the president saying, you're only representing a certain very, very small part of the population that thinks that this is a problem for women because you've turned it into an issue in the media for a problem for women. It really isn't that. We're also organizing this petition to go out in all of the marches on March 23rd. There's freedom marches. One will be on the Capitol, and there are different marches that are going all over the U.S., and you can find those on our website as well, to show that we do have an answer for the question when you say, where are the women? And they're gonna all be there with our t-shirts and with those petitions ready to say, I'm right here. And I'm one of those women that doesn't believe that I need this in a healthcare plan and that does believe in that exemption. So I hope that you guys will join us in those efforts.
Thank you, Monty. Gloria?
Hi. Well, I'm going to talk to you about this from a woman's perspective as a woman's issue, because I think we should talk about that as Catholics, right? And so let me just start off by saying that this whole idea of contraception, sterilization, and abortifacients as being necessary for a woman's health is actually demeaning to women. Undergirding this idea is the perception that women, because of our fertility, are deficient and we need fixing. It says we need pills to be made whole, and when the pills fail, we need something stronger, surgery, abortion. And we need all these things supposedly to be made free, and we know that's not true. The fact that our government is mandating contraceptive coverage be made available and free to all women further presses this false perception into the American psyche. If left unchallenged, what will be the effect upon future generations? So we've already seen the commodification of sex, courtesy of widespread birth control, leading to the commodification of the human person. The idea of the human person, as a result, is divorced from reality. Gender is no longer a biological reality. It's simply an idea in one's head. Marriage has no need for otherness, no such thing as male and female. And being male or female these days is just a matter of surgery. It's just a surgical option because it's all a thought. There's no longer anything true as objective reality. So what new devilry, I ask, will come if these false perceptions are left unchallenged? What can we as Catholic women, Catholic men, what can we do? Well, thankfully, as a part of the new evangelization, we're called to speak the truth. And I think this truth has to even be spoken in Catholic circles because it's the Catholic community itself that's being divided by these false things that are put out in the media, right? Trying to give cover to basically the enemy among us, right? And we know the devil is the enemy of the human person. And so bigger than liberal versus conservative, Obama, whatever. This is the enemy of humanity behind this. And as Catholics, we have to understand that this warfare is a spiritual one, okay? And we can't sit by and be quiet about it. We just can't. And we know, thankfully, from our faith, and thank you for mentioning that our freedom doesn't come from the Constitution. It's a part of who we are as human beings made in the image and likeness of God. And with that, we need to speak forcefully, loudly, and say what we believe. Because a lot of times, as I go into some of these really out there blogs about women's issues, I'm really shocked about how people who self-identify as Catholic just either don't know the faith or they're purposefully twisting the truth. And who twists the truth but the enemy, right? And so you can see that everywhere. You see the terms forced pregnancy being used all the time if religious institutions are given this exemption. And I'd say even greater than religious, bigger than religious institutions, we also need to have personal conscience exemptions, because while I don't work for a religious institution, if I were to start my own business, I certainly don't want to have to provide this kind of objectionable coverage, as woman-hating coverage to my employees. I think we should talk about the true freedom, right, that we see in the church as women. It's a church that allows me full membership without asking me to check my fertility at the door, right? And I even see this mindset where birth control has separated us from the importance of gender, particularly the importance of womanhood, the gift of being able to bear children. I see it even coming forth in arguments for a women priesthood. I think, you know, and I'm going to go there because it's supposed to be a Catholic place. I find the concept, the argument that women must be priests so ridiculous, because we're already naturally ordained to take a sperm and an egg and make a human, living, breathing person. Just like the priest, through the sacrament of ordination, the priest is ordained to take bread and wine and becomes a living, breathing human person, Jesus Christ, who we do believe is truly present, body, soul, and divinity in the Eucharist. It's a person, right? And so we have a special gift from God. In our nature, we're ordained a certain way as women. And I see that so undervalued by this whole idea that we need these contraceptive things to be free, to be fully functioning persons in society, to be successful. And as someone that has had a very successful career in corporate America, managed hundreds and hundreds of people, I also worry that for women in the workplace, if this mandate is unchallenged, that somewhere in there will be an even greater hostility toward motherhood, toward pregnancy. And there will be this underlying unspoken concept that if you're a productive, successful, responsible woman, you will be motherless and childless. And those would be the unspoken requirements to gain access to successful careers. So we should be very worried about this. We should be very concerned because it is an affront against women if it goes unchallenged. And I wanted to talk about that from a woman's perspective because I think it hasn't been said. And we also should be, as Catholics, talking about why we believe what we believe, because the truth is beautiful, the truth is liberating, and the truth is inspiring. We have to have courage to go out there and say these very unpopular things and know that what we stand on is objective truth, and we have the power of God to protect us. It's not to say that it won't get uncomfortable. It's not to say that it may come at some personal cost, lost friendships, certain things even happen to you on your job, but we're called to speak the truth. We're called to speak the truth of power. We're called to speak the truth in charity and with love. And so I wanted to just bring that perspective out because I think a lot of times it's been unsaid. I think if we leave this unchallenged, I'm very much more afraid of what other ridiculousness is going to happen in the future. We didn't think, I'm sure, when people are like, oh, the pill is going to help women, we didn't think it then become, well, you know, you're not really a woman if you don't think you're one in your mind. You can be whatever you want to be. Gender is just some made-up construct in your mind. And I'm like, how much more unhinged from reality are we going to become? And at what cost to our society, to our families, to our nations, and most importantly, to our souls? Thanks.
So I appreciate that many of you have brought up some of the different myths that have really percolated in this debate. And I'm going to actually read some text from HHS's news release after the supposed compromise, and then ask you to kind of comment on it based on what you've talked about. So this is from their press release. Scientists have abundant evidence that birth control has significant health benefits for women and their families. It is documented to significantly reduce health costs, and it is the most commonly taken drug in America by young and middle-aged women. This rule will provide women with greater access to contraception by requiring coverage and by prohibiting cost sharing. So, Marie and Gloria, since you both brought up some of the myths about contraception actually being good for women's health, I'm wondering if you can elaborate on that just a little bit more. And then Carrie and Montse, if you can maybe talk about what could be the motivation behind HHS basically distorting scientific evidence when talking about promoting and selling this mandate.
Well, I'll start because I'm the gynecologist here and we seem to be the ones under attack. I find it interesting that when you read the goals of this mandate, the first thing you said was to control cost. And I find that a terrible reason to list as first when you're talking about something so important as contraception and versus natural fertility. I have a sneaking suspicion that a lot of this Obamacare outline is based on cost. It's not based on human healing or human wellness. Birth control pills, in some instances, can be helpful to treat medical conditions, but that's for a system that's broken. I referred to a healthy system, and in most cases, when women are on contraception, they're doing it because they are healthy. They're doing it because they are healthy and have fertility. They're trying to break the fertility part of health. They want to make themselves infertile. That said, when I look at the real cost of contraception, it has more to do with women breaking their own hearts, with them, as you said, they are taking the sexual identity out of their life. They are becoming just sort of null and void. They're neutral. Whereas the gift of womanhood is so much more than that. It's spiritual, it's love, it's emotional, it's so many things. And when you break that, when you break the fertility cycle in a woman's body, that breaks her body, soul, and spirit. And when we look at the whole person, we realize that she's no longer healthy. She has taken a medication that has taken away her total body's health. And we don't see those costs immediately. We see them later when there may be a problem with depression or alcoholism, anxiety, whatever. And, you know, really, we cause that ourselves in her and don't even realize it. So how can you measure the bigger picture here when you talk about women's health? It makes me hurt sometimes.
I'd say, oh yeah, it's good for women's health. Let's look at all those big warnings when you have these contraceptions. They're like pages telling you what might happen wrong if you take this, and that's good for my health. I remember having a discussion about contraception with women who don't think like me, and for religious reasons. And one woman said, you know, I just don't like the idea of taking a pill that's fooling my body into thinking it's pregnant when it's not. She says, how can that be good for me? And I said, you're sure right. I said, you're sure right. You're sure right. So you know from experience of these medications that it's not true that it's a wonderful health aid to women. We know that there are many, many risks involved with contraception. And this whole idea of reducing health costs, the thing that bothers me about that is it sort of puts on the woman, it's your duty to be fiscally responsible by not having children. You know, and it also sets up the child as the enemy of women and men, right? And then there's this whole concept then of no longer of sex being holy, sacred, wonderful, procreative, something that, you know, is intimate and beautiful. Sex then becomes something you have to protect yourself from, because you also have to use protection when you're having sex. And where do you need protection? You need protection during acts of war. And I certainly don't think that what I do with my husband is an act of war. And I should hope that we realize that when they talk in these terms, that's what it's setting up in our minds, right? And these attitudes and perceptions are being also held by our youth. And also very much if you look at some radical women's groups in their thoughts, like I said earlier, forced pregnancy, the unborn child is a parasite on the woman, that even to go so far as to disavow breastfeeding because it's unfair to the women, because it's something that a man can't do, so we should stop breastfeeding altogether. I mean, these are legitimate thoughts and ideas that people are having as a result of, you know, no one really challenging the canard that these things are good for us when they really aren't. And we know as Catholics, nothing that is set up against us as God made us is ever going to be good for us. We know that as Catholics, and we know that the objective truth through science and whatever is going to bear out these facts. And so we should be very comfortable in talking about these things with people, especially when they don't agree with us.
And if I could add to that, to give a woman the entire responsibility for contraception is really not, even in a secular way, this is not fair. Why should a woman stand in a bathroom taking a pill that's going to make her feel sick, that's going to make her throw up, that's going to fool her body and do all these things, where she could be working with her husband and together using a method of spacing children such as natural family planning, which then engages both of them into this communication and this central project, which builds the relationship that I, for one, think is very important in a marriage. I want to be able to communicate with my husband. If couples can undertake this project and be successful and be truthful and honest about it, if they can do that, they can do about anything this world has to offer. That is a central issue which teaches us so much. It would be such a shame to miss out on that.
just a quick follow-up on Dr. Anderson's comment. It reminds me of a information packet I saw at the student health clinic once. It was comparing all the different kinds of contraceptions with their pros and their cons. And I was struck because one of the cons listed for natural family planning was requires that you're in a committed relationship with good communication skills. And I'm like, that's a con? I mean, this is a really bad sign about the kind of things we're promoting if that's viewed as a negative in the things we're doing. To comment on the way that the government is choosing what's good for us, I think that's exactly what our founders would have been concerned about. Is we're the ones who know who are the ones to make these decisions. Do you really trust your government? I don't trust my government to make a lot of conclusions, even frankly about what for example in DC government here is done efficiently. What is done for the least amount of cost.
Right outside before this meeting.
Exactly. I don't trust them to buy my $12 muffins. Why would I trust them to determine what health care is going to be right for me? And I think it also shows a very ominous kind of trend. So if they can tell us, well, this is for the cost reasons, et cetera, or whatever, this is a good thing. There's a lot of other things that fit into that. Euthanasia easily fits into that bill. Oh, it's so much more efficient to just kill people when we find out they have cancer than to treat them. If you look at it at this black and white numbers level, it gets really scary really fast. On top of which, once you've removed these limits on government, then there's the logical progression is equally frightening. So they can say you have to make sure that you pay for other people to have contraceptive coverage, or you even have to pay for your own self to have contraceptive coverage. I mean, I think it's amusing to think of Mother Angelica paying for her nuns to have contraceptive coverage, but so you have to pay for this. But if the government can make you buy something, why can't it make you at least be informed about how to use it? So you need to learn how to use this, and then if you have children, you need to teach them how to use this. If you are teaching children in a school, if you have a Catholic school, who's to say they don't have to teach children how to use these wonderful drugs that are so good for everyone and so efficient for society, right? And then if you're homeschooling your child, you have to teach your own child. The exemptions from getting out of that become much smaller because this is a public health issue, right? This isn't an issue of your religion. And then the last step, of course, is if this is so fundamentally great for society and so efficient, then and now that once we've whittled down all of the religious rights, where are the rights then to say they can't just make us use this? Why can't they stand up and say, it's really much more efficient if women just have 2.3 children apiece, so we can just make it over the self-replacement hump, and so you can and you can't. I mean, this is the stuff of everyday science fiction novels, but it's frightening to see how many steps toward it we've taken and how many of the natural barriers that our government has that we are, or that hopefully not we, but that the members of government are willing to brush aside. Of course, they're the ones who have the power. They trust themselves. I think we should develop a healthy skepticism toward them.
I completely agree with that. I think that there's the ominous trend that you're referring to is also an ominous cultural trend to try to tell us what our religious rights actually are based on opinion polls and statements of generalizations that aren't really true or aren't compelling to individuals that have religious beliefs or deeply held religious beliefs. And the one thing that's really scary is that they always tell you that, you have to know that biologically this is when a life starts, but biology does not dictate your theology. And they're trying to use that as an excuse to tell people what to believe. And the government, in order to not violate your religious freedom, cannot ever tell you what to believe. And that's what's so fundamental here, is when is our government going to actually, that's exactly what you were referring to. Our founding fathers would never allow a government to tell you, well, this is what you believe now and this is what you have to pay for. That they don't go together.
But they will do that. They will tell everybody else what we believe if we don't start telling people what we believe. Exactly. So I think that it is this happening to us, I don't think is accidental, in the sense that I think God is trying to tell us, people, you need to say, we need to say what we believe and why. We should be speaking the truth among ourselves and to others. And I do see this whenever these kind of challenges happen. I'm like, okay, God, what are you trying to say? I think my mouth is pretty big already, but what are you trying to say, really? And so I think about, how much more am I supposed to give a witness when I can, when it's appropriate, when it's uncomfortable, when I'm fearful, when I'm like, gee, I really want them to like me, but oh well. So it's I do think God is trying to tell us something. He's trying to make an invitation to us to step closer to Him through speaking the truth.
Just a follow-up question on that point. A two-part question. One, why aren't we hearing from more women with your positions? And secondly, what are some of the concrete ways, Montse, you mentioned a couple, that women can start getting engaged and plugging in their voices that each of you are aware of in your respective professions or that you've encountered?
Well, I mean, I'm happy to always pitch that there are marches and there are petitions. You're welcome to go on becketfund.org, and we have all of the resources there that you need to be able to have a real debate on these issues. I think it's because we're so immersed in this every day and we're definitely working on this. We have our little list of arguments that we go and we tell people and we fight with them, but I don't think that that's so easy for everyone to just come up and say, okay, well, this is what I think. You have to really, really study it a little bit to formulate a good opinion. And I would just give a personal witness to the fact that I'm probably the only person in my circle of friends that really does believe that there's a problem with the way that the administration is taking this. And I am one of those girls who went to my OBGYN and cried my way out of that office because I was yelled at by a nurse who told me, "Are you crazy? What's wrong with you?" And so it's a real struggle as an individual to be that unpopular person who's, always got a problem with what's going on and with the mainstream, and I don't like Kim Kardashian. So it's a really, it's a scary thing to do, but it's the instruments and the information is there, but we just have to have the guts to do it. And I would pitch that Ashley has a phenomenal online magazine that everyone should be writing for. All the women in this room should have the guts to tell their personal story and pitch it to her.
I would say, well, let me just say, I'm not, my family's not Catholic. I am. My parents aren't. I had a wonderful experience in front of the Eucharist, converted at 12, and then all my sisters converted. So my parents are the only non-Catholics in the house. And but my cousins, everybody else, no one's Catholic. And I'm like, well, they can't fire me from the family. So I talk to them. I mean, I have real conversations with my family, and they have a relationship, and they know you, and they love you. They may not like what you have to say, but they're going to hear you. And so I would say that's one of the things you can do. Talk about this in your family. Even if your family is Catholic, talk about it, because you'd be surprised how many people actually don't understand what it is we believe and why, we believe it. And so for me, talking to my family, especially since our vice president's Catholic, my parents are like, but Joe Biden's Catholic, and Nancy Pelosi's Catholic, and what do you mean? And I'm like, well, they may identify, but this is what we believe. So there's a scandal even among people who aren't Catholic when you have our Catholic, publicly self-identifying, non-practicing, I guess I would say, Catholics saying that this is how it is. And so we do have the opportunity to talk to our families. That's one way to get involved. I would say another way to get involved is also to go on the blogs, read what they're saying in the Washington Post, read what they're saying on, well, maybe you don't want to go to Jezebel because that might really wig you out. But go to, and comment, post and comment, challenge some of the things that are being said. I mean, you can do those things. Be nice, be charitable, because it's all about love and truth and bringing people to truth. And so those are some of the ways that you can get involved, I think, that may not have as much personal cost in terms of what's happening on your job or with some of your friends. Talk to family and go on the blogs. That'd be my other two suggestions.
And I agree with both your kind recommendations. I think they're great. In a medical perspective, we as Catholics are in the minority if you are defining Catholics as practicing according to the magisterium of the Church. I know a lot of Catholics that are my friends and they're doctors, but most of them are fallen away Catholics. And I never give up hope on them. I am constantly bringing up the faith. People at our hospital just know to agree to disagree with us. I practice at Fair Oaks, and we've been there since the beginning of the hospital. The hospital began in 1988, and we've been there since 94. So they expect these things of us, and they admire us for our courage. They'll even tell us that, but then they'll turn around and say, but I can never do that. To declare yourself as a Catholic physician is very difficult because it's not a private faith anymore. When you bring it to the workplace, all of a sudden it's public. And that is really, I think at the heart of the matter of this Obamacare is that this is all founded on privacy. If you think back, what was the deciding principle in Roe v. Wade? It was decided on privacy. It was not on the right to life. It was not on any other things. It was decided in terms of the right of a woman to have her privacy. And so I see that in this bill as being huge, that it's okay for an individual to have a private faith, but when you bring that faith to the workplace, that's a problem. And so with our coworkers, with patients, with our friends, the Catholic Medical Association is a wonderful form of networking and support for us physicians. We have a local guild in the Northern Virginia area. The American Association of Pro-Life OBGYNs just had their national meeting this weekend in Washington. In fact, I was just a couple blocks away for that. So, organizations such as that, and then, of course, write to your senator and your Congress and make yourself be heard, but always, as you said, in a kind way, because we have the truth, but we have to present it as Christ would, in a loving, growing way.
There's so many good ideas that already came out. I echo all of those. In some ways, just thinking back to maybe the last time that conscience became very clear in the public sphere, which was probably with the conscientious objections during the Vietnam War and objections to fighting. And I think that that should provide a good model for us in some ways. I'm not saying go out there and burn our draft cards necessarily, but that was a time when this was even a national security issue, and our country was willing to allow conscientious objections, not because you were part of a specific group and you named, I'm this religion that is pacifist. No, you just had to have a sincere, personal held belief. It could even be a philosophical one, not a religious one, that was opposed to that, and the government offered alternatives. You could do other kinds of government service, other kinds of things. I think if we stand up and are willing to say, yes, I am opposed to this, then they'll realize, oh, this isn't just these this handful of nuns in Alabama that feel this way. There actually are people who believe this, and as long as they keep on listening to people like Nancy Pelosi, like Joe Biden, they may believe that, this is so passé. No one's thought that since the 15th century. Yeah, there really are people who are still striving to live their faith today. Call your senator, call your congressman, and the other way is speak with your wallet. This has been a good moment, even for me. Like my husband and I looked and realized our insurance covers contraception, and we're going to look into the alternative, see if there is one that we can find that's not supporting that. If there was a real market for a Catholic insurance program, there would be such an insurance program. I have friends who have small businesses and realize, it never occurred to me, but I just discovered that my plan does, and now I'm on the market to find something else. If you have a need in the market, it will be filled. And that's a great opportunity. Now, of course, it can't be filled as long as the government is declaring that there's no such legal plan out there. But I think if it's clear that there's a real demand for that, and that means we have to stand up and be willing to be counted.
One last thing I want to say, and Christ himself said some demons only go out through prayer and fasting. So we cannot underestimate the power of prayer, fasting, holy hour, having masses said. Those, I think, are probably the most supremely efficacious way to fight this.
Amen. It's Lent, so this is a good time a good purpose for your fasting is our country and the direction it's going in so many ways.
One question maybe for the women who are from legal backgrounds, and then also a couple of you are on the boards of Catholic nonprofits or affiliated with nonprofits, but in the instance that the HHS does not change its position and this continues to move forward, and let's say Obama is reelected and they don't budge, legally, what's going to be, how will the dominoes fall? And then can those of you who are on the boards of nonprofits or affiliated with Catholic nonprofits, can you talk about what your office is? Has there been an initial discussion about what you'll do? Will we see civil disobedience, or will you close your doors? Can you talk kind of in concrete terms about how this will play out if, in fact, the exemption is not broadened and HHS doesn't budge?
Just to speak to the legal perspective, as things stand, and frankly, even the promises of compromise don't look like they're going to materially change anything. If this mandate continues, I think what you'll see is first something that Dr. Anderson predicted, which is that you're going to have a large number of Catholic organizations that are getting out of the healthcare business altogether, because it's going to be even harder than it already is to be able to practice a type of healthcare that's consistent with Catholicism. Unfortunately, you're going to see a lot of religious organizations and religious individuals that are going to be faced with really the untenable choice between facing crushing fines and having to engage in civil disobedience. Because even if you happen to be below the level where you get fined for not providing this healthcare or not having it for yourself, you still have to break the law to do so. You will be in violation of law if right. For example, your business wants government contracts and has to be able to sign something saying I'm not in violation of federal law. You can't do that anymore if you are not providing this healthcare. So there's all sorts of reasons it's going to really destroy that. We're already seeing a big invasion into various careers, making it very hard for people of faith to operate in them. There are cases that are going on right now that have gone both ways, actually, in terms of pharmacists being able to operate if they don't dispense contraceptives, and abortifacients, and in terms of psychologists, if they're able to even practice if they aren't willing to put a stamp of approval on same-sex relationships. There's step by step. There are avenues that are being closed off to peace bill of faith in America. I have a friend whose parents came here from Indonesia specifically because their children didn't have the full range of options because of their ethnicity and because of their religion. They weren't able to get any job, and they said, we want to come to America so our children have those options and can be part of any career they want to. Unfortunately, that part of the American dream is being closed off if people of faith are being shut out of these careers, and I fear that that's going to happen if we see this continuing. So we're going to have to see some kind of either massive civil disobedience, or it's just going to be, or we'll see, unfortunately, people of faith rolling over. I don't think that will happen. But you'll see things like the Catholic Charities is already out of the adoption business in many states. And we're just going to see the Catholic Church is going to have to be out of the healthcare business, and then maybe even out of the employing business, or there's just going to be out of the being financially stable business.
I would say for our 4 clients, 3 universities and 1 business, the fines for 2 of the colleges would actually be so crippling that they would have to close their doors. And for one of the universities, Belmont Abbey College, the president has said that he would much rather close the doors than fight and provide this. So there is some hope in knowing that there is a university out there that's willing to say, you know what, I am so opposed to this that I will close my doors. But for the businesses that can carry on, if they do pay these fines, then unfortunately they become undesirable employers, because who doesn't need health care? I mean, we're looking at one little itty-bitty part of it for large families or small families, or someone who has an ailment. When you have your employer health care, that's the only way that you cover pre-existing conditions. So there's a really big issue there for these employers. Even if they do manage to keep their doors open, all of a sudden no one's going to want to work there. So there is a little bit of hope. We recently won a case in Washington State where there were 2 pharmacists and 1 pharmacy that didn't want to dispense this, and they were contraceptives and the week after pill and the morning after pill. They've always worked through a referral program, and we managed to get an exemption for them. So there is some hope there if you're willing to be brave enough. And Thelma and Margot and Ralph's Thriftway were brave enough to say, I can't do this, and I will get fired, and I will close my pharmacy. And the moment that these businesses that are a part of a community shut down, even people that don't necessarily believe in this or that aren't necessarily a part of this say, hey, wait a minute, this is my neighbor, this is my friend that I grew up with, and they're good people, and I'm going to fight for them. So we have to have a little bit of hope in that as well.
I'd just like to say that I'm thanking both of you for the legal perspective that you're giving me, because I feel very much out on the front line, and I may be one of those practices that would have to say these fines are just terribly prohibitive. There's no way we can come up with enough money to pay these fines so that we can come to work to serve people. And this is a travesty. It really is. And unfortunately, my influence goes about as far as the noise that I can make, the enthusiasm I can stir up to join our cause, but there is a certain limit to what we can do as doctors if the laws are set up so that there's nothing more that we can do. Cardinal George said recently, inside of 2 years, Catholicism will be out of the healthcare business unless the laws change. And so I congratulate both of you for the work you're doing, and I hope that the laws do change. And they will only change if all of us speak up, because, as you said, it's the market. It's the voters. It's whatever. It's either the vote or the money that speaks the loudest in a democracy, which this still technically is. And I would encourage you to make your voices heard, especially in those ways, because to argue this on moral grounds, we're not going to win that. But if we make this so that it is appealing enough, and these administrators, these administrations realize that our votes count, we can put them out of office if we're not heard. That's where we will get people supporting us. It's either in the marketplace or realizing that we each have a vote.
Well, I'm on the board of an organization. We're not a religious organization. We're a nonprofit, a secular nonprofit with Catholic values. Actually, we have a board meeting tomorrow night to talk about just things, and I'm sure this will be one of them. So I'm not sure yet what we're going to do. But I definitely say what turned the tide in the civil rights movement was people seeing dogs getting let loose on children and fire, hoses of water getting poured on people and things like that. If we are able to reveal to the American public the great injustice that is happening to us, I would like to believe that non-Catholics and even people who disagree with us on a matter of freedom of belief would support us. I mean, I don't know what is going to happen, but yes, I definitely would advocate we must, as a matter of conscience, fight this, whether it be in the ballot box, and if we don't win there, we have to do something more. We can't roll over and get in the bed with the devil. We just can't. And it's hard to get his stink off of you once you do, okay? So we can't do that. And the other thing that I want to say is, as an African American, I see a lot, as soon as people start framing this as an Obama thing, it makes it really hard to go into the community and talk truth because of a lot of racial injustice that has happened in the past, and some people are still experiencing, myself included. It makes it very hard for people to not see this as just some racist canard to get at Obama. Mm-hmm. So I try to not frame it in terms of Obama, in terms of Republican, in terms of Democrat. I try to frame this in terms of truth and talk in terms of ideas. And I find that I get a much more receptive audience, and people willing to say, well, I never thought of it that way. And oh, yeah. And yeah, these are things that I actually believe and hold true. And yeah, I'm with you on that. And by and large, that is a lot of President Obama's base, in the African-American community, African-American Catholics even. So we have to be careful in terms of how we talk about this issue to not reduce it to mere politics, because it is bigger than this. And so that's one of the things that I, want to say and want before we end, make sure I say that. And I don't know what we're going to do as a secular nonprofit, but I know that we all feel strongly, and we're all strong believers. And it's going to be difficult, but we can't roll over. We just can't.
We have about 15 minutes for questions. I would ask that you try and keep your question to a question and on the concise side if possible. And then I would ask the panelists if you could go ahead and repeat the question, just in case it gets lost in translation.
Sure, this is actually more for you. I just wondering, momentum and information is a great thing, so I was wondering if you would consider having a series. Like I know they said from the Beckett Fund that they have a lot of information on the website for good ideas to do. I think it's the Beckett Fund. So I'm just wondering, we're already here, and we could come back if people in guiding us through, their organization's take. Because even if it was a weekly series during Lent or something, I think people don't want to see this die away through lack of collaboration or whatnot. So I, for one, would come back if there was some sort of series like that.
Yeah, sure. I can't speak for the CIC, but I know that there are similar panels underway, and I do absolutely agree that continuing to keep the conversation going is crucial to not letting it fade away. So thank you for that point.
Yes. I have two questions. One is, what do you think this issue, how do you think this issue might impact the Supreme Court challenge to the mandate being constitutional? And second of all, I totally agree with it. It's a First Amendment issue, you know, foremost. However, because it's been framed by the Obama administration, the media, as a women's health issue, I think we have to still address the fact that they're calling contraception preventative health care. I mean, how, you know, that is just you know, ridiculous. It's not preventative health care, it's, as you said, destructive health care.
It's just plain not.
Yeah, and so I think that's also important. I mean, you don't want to get the two mixed up because you want to keep everybody focused on the First Amendment. So just kind of strategically, that's kind of a tricky thing.
Just speaking to the Supreme Court challenge, that's something that some of the, to repeat the question, the first one was about how this is affecting the Supreme Court challenge underway, and the second one was just making the point of this is how to keep it on the First Amendment, but also talk about the fact that it's not preventative care. Pregnancy is not a disease. You're not preventing something. To speak to the way it will influence the Supreme Court, there were amicus briefs filed in the Supreme Court making this point because it goes to the problems that I highlighted with if you are overwhelming the constitutional limitations on government, then this is just showing the next step that will happen. I mean, practically, the judges should not be considering whether they like the bill or don't like the law in terms of their decision. But I think constitutionally, it points out that as you're going over certain constitutional limits, you're also likely to put others at risk as well. And by making this a nationalized system, it does create this risk. I mean, if you didn't have the mandate that everyone buy it, you wouldn't have the same problem because places could still self-insure, and that's what a lot of people have talked about. Oh, states have this rule already. Well, there are 28 states that have similar things, but they have much better exemptions than the president came up with, and even the two, California and Hawaii, that have very narrow exemptions, you still have the option of just either not providing health care or of self-insuring. You don't have that option because of the way this health care bill is so all-encompassing. So I think while that shouldn't be the legal analysis, I think it might make certain justices feel less guilty if they end up striking it down because they can see that this is going in some bad directions. And it points out another a real constitutional issue with the litigation that's, if it's not struck down at this point, is going to probably work its way up to the Supreme Court as well. Keep going, Monsi. Yeah.
Well, and to address the concern once more about prevention and contraception, you know, you could reframe that argument and say, well, that's what we're addressing now. Women's health has been chosen as the chessboard, and the women are the pawns, and you know they are being moved around the board. They could have picked anything, and in a way, the progression that I'm seeing goes from simple to complex, and they've picked not something that's simple per se, but they've chosen contraception and sterilization in the morning after pill, which in some parts of the population, these things are popular. In a way, we're looking at the bigger picture saying, okay, this is what they've picked, but is it going to be abortion next that they're going to say no one can opt out of? And honestly, many women have abortions, but everyone sitting in this room is the result that their mother did not have an abortion. So that is a problem that affects all of us. And we're all here because we were not aborted. So take that and go global with it. There are many other health issues along the way that then start including children and men and other segments of the population. When each one of us comes to near the end of our life, we're going to be making end-of-life decisions. And it would not surprise me one bit at all to have these edicts then extend to, okay, well, this is a person that's going to cost us so many days in the ICU, and these are the things that they're going to need to sustain their life. They may not be extraordinary means, but they are more expensive than just saying this is it. And so this insurance company can then say, okay, well, it's cheaper for you to die. And that is a sorry state of affairs, but when you see a progression like I am seeing in medicine, it's hard to believe that that wouldn't be eventually on their list.
I would say this is a great opportunity for us to take back terms. What do they mean by women's health? What do you mean by that? When I had very heated discussions with, people that, believe that, you have to have contraception to be free. And I'm like, free from what? Free from what? Free to do whatever I want. And I said, that's not freedom, that's license. So when you start to have the conversations, it's a good time to take back the terms and really start to ask them the questions. And, you come to the conclusion, maybe their whole definition of freedom, generally speaking, is off. It's freedom to do what they want, which is license. Real freedom is a freedom to be able to do the good. And then you can get into talking about what is good and this and any other. But this is an opportunity for us to take back terms, because a lot of times that's how they try to win, or should I say misguide people by not using terms correctly. So that would be my advice.
Question there?
Wait, did you have something to say?
Yeah.
Wait, do you have one more?
Sorry, I just want to add one really quick comment to that. I think that it's really important for us as Catholics to frame the issues the same way that they're being framed to us and respond in terms and language that is understood by the other party who doesn't believe the same thing that you believe. And unfortunately, framing it as a women's issue kills it for us because it's so incredibly popular on the other side. And it's not how you win the argument. And right. So the reason why I, as an individual, and the Beckett Fund in general, has decided not to frame this as a women's issue is because it's a much smarter argument when you make it about everyone, when you make it about every man and woman in the room. Mm-hmm. It becomes much more general, and it affects every single person, especially when it's constitutional. Then the religion doesn't even matter. That's out the door. When you make it about fundamental rights, it's so universal that it's undeniable.
Sorry.
No, that was good. My question was in reference to, it was great to hear you read from the HHS press release and what they are willing to put out, officially from the government as, quote, the truth. And again, claiming that it's based on science. I know that they also lent their decision to the Institute of Medicine, and they use that as their rationale for why they use these services, preventive health care services, as being mandatory or in need. And then the Institute of Medicine, on its board, were members of Planned Parenthood that were also physicians making this unbiased decision. But I think there's a lot of confusion out there because you also have the issue of religious freedom, religious liberty, and they're trying to say, well, we have science and that trumps religion. But then when you look at the science and you peel the layers of the onion of what they're using to defend their debate, it's really not hardcore truth in science. And I was curious as to the Catholic Medical Association, what they're able to do to step out there in the forefront and get their message out. Because there's a lot of confusion where you hear the Catholic Healthcare Association and Sister Carol Keenan saying,
not the same organization. You'll notice I didn't mention that one. Well, the Catholic Medical Association is composed of people who follow the magisterium of the Church, and we have support from many aspects of life. We have the doctors that we mentor with each other, and we serve as a resource for each other, but we also draw heavily from the law field, from education, and we have very outspoken people, but we are one organization. So we always will feel aided by more people speaking up. So part of what our work needs to be is to generate enthusiasm in the country of all the people that can also help us and write to their Congress and change the laws and complain and be heard and not let this just kind of dry up. Don't let it be forgotten. Always remember and open your mouth whenever you can to help others remember too. Our organization is a wonderful one, but many times the Catholic Health Organization is confused with the Catholic Medical Association, and their goals are very different.
I think we have time for one, maybe two more questions.
I was glad to hear you talk about the progression, the quick progression and how things are moving along, because my mind went right to that. When this first went, I thought anybody who can make us pay for contraceptives and sterilizations the morning after pill can also make us take those pills. And once they tell you to take them, then they can tell you, well, you know, we told you to take the pills, and you're pregnant, so I'm sorry, that doesn't fit into our budget now. You know, we only have budgeted money for an abortion and not, you know, you've already had one child or two. So I see like the one-child policy coming down the road. And my question to you is, do you think that's helpful when we're talking to other people, especially non-Catholics, to get them to think about how things would move forward? Because I know, you know, to some people, and even to me, it just sounds so bizarre. It sounds like something out of a terrible novel, you know, 1984 or whatever. But it could really happen, especially since things are moving along so quickly. So is it helpful to make people think about that?
I would just add really quickly, it may sound completely unfathomable to force women to take contraception, but in China, women are required to take contraception, and there is actually some sort of governing authority that comes through and forces women to take urine tests to confirm that they are in fact taking hormonal contraception. So this is not an outlandish question.
It's also, I'm sorry to interrupt, it's also happening in the Philippines. There's an RH bill, a reproductive health care bill. It's this cleverly disguised version of a two-child policy in the Philippines. So what we do here to build momentum and bear fruit from tonight's meeting is critical, not just in DC, but the ripple will be felt all around the globe. So prayer and fasting, as you said, is key. And Marie, what you said, we've got to get out there with our votes, and we've got to do it for our children, because if we don't stand up now, we will be walked on the rest of this generation and the generations to come.
Because the pattern's being set up, and once it's established, it's going to be virtually impossible to stop it. We have to stop it now before it is established, because you bring up very good points.
Yeah, and going to whether strategically how we address, because we sound like we're pennies going around, the sky is falling. If you do this, everything else is going to follow. But I think it's interesting to look at the actual argument. One thing is to point out that, yes, this is happening in China, it's starting to happen in other places like the Philippines. But also, one of the big questions that's come up both in the healthcare arguments in the legal sense, and if you look at another case that the administration, we have a very bad precedent on earlier this year, Hosanna Tabor, which the Becket Fund was involved in, had to do with whether a church has the freedom to choose its own ministers and teachers. And thankfully the Supreme Court came down 9-0 unanimously in favor of religious freedom in that case, but the position argued by the administration had no limiting principle in it. And that's the same problem that with the argument they're making in the case of Obamacare in general. There is no limiting principle. So they can say, oh, no, we would never do that. No. Of course, we wouldn't make Catholic churches hire female priests. No, we wouldn't make Jewish rabbis be ordained, conservative or Orthodox synagogues ordain female rabbis. You say you wouldn't, but they had to admit that there wasn't actually anything in their argument that could prohibit it. So it all boils down to trust me. And then it boils down to, do you trust them? So if you look at their actual argument, it's not so scary.
As you're saying that, I'm picturing them writing down, make them hire women priests.
Right.
Honestly, it's almost like they're looking for things to make sure that they ensure their position of power and they show us where they are.
Well, let me just say this with your question. I deal a lot in redefining marriage and talking to people about that and saying, well, what's next? You know, what's wrong? Well, then why not polyamory? Why not? Oh, that's just ridiculous. Why not just groups of people getting married and whatever? And people are already doing that. But the response when you start to take it to its logical conclusion is you're just scaremongering. You know, so they don't even want to go the logical place, these things where they take us. And then you also have to remember the person you're talking to themselves may be contracepting. They may have been sterilized. They may have had an abortion, or they've been living a lifestyle that they're dependent upon contraception. You know, if it's a man, you know, that they're depending upon these certain things because that's how their lifestyle is. So sometimes you have to remember your audience. And one of the things that always struck me in talking about redefining marriage is talking to Christian couples who have no problem with it. I'm like, how can that be? And then it's like, well, because their experience of sex is no different than if two men or two women have sex, because their sex is fruitless, because they contracept. And so they're so divorced procreation from the sexual act that they see no difference between what they do and what a same-sex couple does. So sometimes you have to recognize your audience and tailor your points to them and understand what their personal experiences are and how that shapes how they're willing to hear the truth. But don't be discouraged. Plant the seed. The Holy Spirit will do the rest.
One more question right here.
Well, now this is why I'm here, because the Catholic Church, as long as I've been a Catholic, has had these teachings that I learned from Life magazine long before I became a Catholic, with the pictures of babies that they had. That's where I got my ideas on that. I'm wondering, I've seen that the Catholic Church never really explained this very well until now, until these things happened. Our pastor began the explanation in a way that I was beginning to grasp, and now I've discovered in the morning that the Catholic radio station, 1160, they're beginning to tell us websites slower than you did tonight. So what I need to get some more information, because I can't do this without information. Explain these things. It hasn't been explained well to Catholics, as far as I know, until now. But I need those websites from them. I have to write those down too, and I need the ones I heard tonight, because I couldn't go that fast.
You need the sign-on statements?
The magazine, the online magazine?
Oh, the online magazine. It's Alt Catholica.
A-L?
A-L-T-C-A-T-H.
Alt Catholic
AH. And I'll find you afterwards.
And then with a few more here. And I'll try to write down the ones from that radio station as well, because there was a good one about parents.
I would say I just want to make one comment, which I love my church, but I think that we've gotten way too many requests from becketfund.org, BECKETFUND.org. Way too many requests for information, which makes me very, very worried for my church. Because it's very, very real that 41% of women that is Catholic and is fighting for this mandate, the reality is that possibly they're just misinformed. And that scares me. Because there's nothing scarier than a misinformed person fighting for something.
Yeah. And also, I have a handout in the back, and there are many of those websites on it, and then this is a pamphlet from our office. So,
well, my series isn't out yet. It's still in production with EWTN. It's called Authentically Free at Last. And we talk about these issues and the underlying principles. And I think those will be very helpful in having discussions. It's supposed to come out either the end of this year or the beginning of this year. Or you can email EWTN and tell them to get to it.
They have EWTN has a wonderful resource page on their website as well.
Yeah.
Because as a non-cable person, a lot of their shows are not there for us later. But some are, but not too many. And
that's Gloria TV.
Podcast.
Maybe we can screen it here.
And the EWTN ones are available on audio normally.
Yours is going to be available online, right?
I'm not sure how they'll do it initially. I think they'll just have the DVDs out, and then they'll show it though on EWTN, and then I think you can watch on their website. When the series starts to come out, you can see some of the episodes then. Yeah.
Some of the speakers don't have their programs available. Some things are, but most of the big ones, like Jeff Hayes.
Look for the audio version. A lot of times they don't have the video, but they have the audio.
Okay, Mary Campbell, that's better.
On the way here, I was listening to some tapes on how to explain the marriage issue, and there's some very good things on that, and I would suggest doing something like this on that issue as well. But the closing remark was the woman reading from Hegel, explaining you know, his view on the family and the role of family and the economy and the state. And when you hear that, this is what it all boils down to: give the state the power by breaking the family. And both issues come right into that. And it happened in my country, Cuba. So those of us that have lived it and have seen the state kick out the Catholic Church, destroy the economy by destroying the health system, it's not just that Catholics won't be able to do it, it's that the country won't be able to survive economically if you know, outright eliminate these big portions of our economic system.
I just want to make one statement about talking to people using their own language. For example, if we want to take the politics out of this topic, Obamacare actually polls very poorly with independents and liberals because it politicizes the debate. So one way to connect with independents on this issue is government control of healthcare, and that makes people look at it differently. Because Obama is still popular, they think of him personally, and they think that you have a political agenda when you use Obamacare, but talking about government control of healthcare, that's how you connect.
Wow, this has been so fruitful, this discussion. Oh, yes, okay, finally, one last question.
Recently, there was that guy, Joel Freeman, on Christian radio, who was talking about every Black History Month. He talks about the accomplishments of blacks in the past, you know, and how they were obliterated, hidden, etc. And he gives, you know, free material. And last week, something that came to my mind was that when those awful things happen, our problem really is with God. I'm a Haitian citizen. I'm a Catholic, but I'm a Haitian citizen. So it's, to some extent, it's no concern to me. But I found that it's easier speaking to other blacks in terms of God's will. Like when I read the Bible extensively, like cover to cover twice, and I was so shocked at the number of times God threatened His own chosen people with banishment or exile or slavery. So often, you know, in so many terms, in so many awful terms, you know, and it got me to think, okay, but what about us? If we can threaten, you know, His own chosen people, you know, with banishment or exile or slavery, what about us? Why shouldn't we assume that this would happen to us, you know, when God judges us? And it's freed my mind a lot to speak about, you know, my own people, you know, or to talk to them when they say this or that, and say, oh, if you read the Bible, you'd realize this or that, you know, or if you read Proverbs, you realize, you know, the attitude God wants us to adopt, you know, in such a situation. So it freed my mind a lot to think in terms of God's will.
That's true. Nothing new under the sun, and that's our consolation with these challenges ahead.
And somehow the message seemed to get across well, and I was relieved because it was something, you know, I've spoken to a young cousin recently. I gave her a Catholic Bible, and I wrote about it to her because we are Judeo-Christians by origin. Okay, we are Jewish, you know, ancestors, so it touches us particularly, and I thought it would touch her. But when I realized those things are spread out and people don't realize, you know, that God will judge us all. Okay, and then I feel an obligation to just speak them.
Thank you, and I think we'll have continued opportunities to talk to the panelists afterwards if you have other questions or other points that you want to make. But I'll hand it over to Mary Rose to wrap things up.
Yes, thank you. I'd like to thank everyone for coming here, you know, despite the traffic difficulties. And I'd like to thank all of our panelists. I'd like to thank Gloria. Thank you. We're going to make audio of this available on the CIC website, and also the video as well. And we are also going to create a resource page, and we'd love to welcome Lourdes onto the platform. This is what our beliefs look like.
And I was told to abort her. Can you believe that? Oh yeah, we had a fight out, let me tell you. We had a fight with my doctor.
Good. So to continue the fight, but we're going to be making a resource page available on the CIC website. So for people like you or people who want all these addresses and web addresses all in one place, we're going to be making that available. So keep your eye out on the CIC website, where we'll also have this video available. So, and if you like events like these, please don't hesitate to visit us online and contribute financially. Your financial support really helps us. The donations are really what keep the CIC going and keep events like this. So again, I'd like to thank all the panelists and for all Catholica for co-sponsoring this. And thank you all. Have a good evening.
I got it up there. She thinks we're clapping for it? What? She thinks we're all clapping for it?